Hi everyone, number one Marmaduke fan here, and we are looking at American Born Chinese by Jean Luen Yang. This is the winner of the Michael L. Prince Award for Excellence in Young Adult Literature from the American Library Association. And for a while it seemed like American Born Chinese was the book every library was kind of propping up as the hit thing. This is not my favorite work by Jean Luen Yang. I much prefer Boxers and Saints. I think that's the best thing he's written. And American Born Chinese, I kind of look at that as maybe like the first draft of some of the themes he would explore in Boxers and Saints. But I still respect the heck out of it. And one of the things I respect about American Born Chinese is on the surface, it has a lot of what might seem like, oh, the annoying library book qualities. So it's about like a young American born Chinese student struggling with racism and identity. And the thing is that books about racism have kind of become like books about the environment where it's such a cliche. You know everything that's going to happen, and they're often so dreary, or they like have a victimhood mentality to it. But what, to Jean Luen Yang's credit, this is a story about racism where racism is a part of an actual story, and where the protagonist kind of has to learn something about himself. And I actually think that the moral of the story is pretty countercultural, probably because Jean Luen Yang's Catholicism really informs his perspective on how he draws. What I really love is sort of the weird mix of Chinese myth and Catholicism into a big stew. That's one of the most interesting and kind of unique things about Yang's work. So I'm just going to flip through it a little bit. The conceit of the story is that it's telling three different stories that interlace with one another. And there's like a real twisteroo ending at the end that I will not spoil. I don't understand the ending. I try to like look back at it and make sense of it, and I don't know if I'm just too dumb to understand the logic of it, or if it's supposed to be like a really mysterious and difficult to interpret ending. But it's an interesting twisteroo. But I'm not going to spoil that or talk about that, or else the whole video will be me trying to interpret what the ending's about. I'm just going to talk about the main thrust of the stories. So the first one is an adaptation of The Journey to the West, which is the legend of the Monkey King. You will probably recognize this character as having inspired, Goku of Dragon Ball Z, inspired so much Chinese myth and imagery. The Journey to the West is like this iconic, Chinese piece of literature. And Yang's drawing style is very simple, almost a little stiff, but I think it serves this kind of the simple, straightforward narrative well. So I like simple cartoon styles. I'm more of a Schultz guy, but I think that I think Yang's style works for what he's doing. The second story involves this young guy, Jin Wang. Jean Yang, who maybe have at least some elements of the author in him. So Jin likes Transformers. His parents tell him, Chinese folklore, and he's having a hard time at school. Now, there will be like several instances of what are supposed to be like microaggressions against him, I think. But the point of Jin Wang's character is he really wants to fit in, right? Which is a very universal, kind of identifiable problem. So after kind of years of sort of being a lonely, weird kid, he meets another, weirder Chinese kid, and kind of helps him, assimilate to the American culture. Like, what's the new kid's name? The new kid's name is Wei Chen, and Wei Chen is a little bit more fobbish, and their friendship kind of takes up the second part of the story. The third one, which is probably going to be the interesting one, everyone rubs Chin Ki, and then it's like a fake sitcom. So this is a overt racial Chinese caricature, and the point of it, I think, is to sort of be a meta commentary on racial caricatures themselves. I don't get like the sitcom vibe. I kind of wish that it had kept more with like the tradition of like comics formats, but it's like a sitcom character, and Chin Ki is like a completely over the top, ridiculous, silly, stupid, pervy, kung fu, nasty Chinese stereotype, right? He's all of those things. And Danny, who's like blonde, very Caucasian, is humiliated by cousin Chin Ki and just doesn't want him to be around at all. He's afraid that Chin Ki is going to ruin his social life. So those are three narratives, and in the early parts of the chapter, it remains separate. I won't, like I said, I won't spoil the ending, but there's a twisteroo at the end where you find out what these three narratives have to do with one another. My personal favorite is the adaptation of The Journey to the West, and I almost wish this was the entire book. Like the Chin Ki story and the story about Jin Wang, the Monkey King is also dealing with refusal. He's dealing with feelings of shame, and he's experiencing racism. So because he's a monkey, he's hated and rejected by the other Chinese gods, and his quest is to become the superior of the Chinese gods, right? So that's a great facilitation of the themes of being an outcast, feeling ashamed of oneself based on one's heritage, being ashamed of oneself based on things that are outside of your control, your inherited traits. So that's the most subtle of the three stories, and then the themes of all three stories eventually come together. Now, the weird thing and the unique thing about Jin Yang's story is his integration of Christian and Catholic elements into Chinese folklore. And he said he did this because his mother was Chinese Catholic, and she would mix up the kind of Christian stories and the Chinese stories. So things kind of are going along normal for the Monkey King, and then a woman, a lion, a bull. Is it a bull? Yeah, I think it's a bull and an eagle show up, which are classic since ancient Christianity. They're classic representations of the four Gospels. And so that's the first weird thing. And then he runs into a sort of Chinese divine figure. I've read that in the original stories, it's Buddha. And the Monkey King and God, effectively, it's sort of like a Catholic idea of God brought into the context of Chinese folklore, have this really great interchange about how you have been created to be. And I love it all. I love when he plays with conventions a bit and has the Monkey King breaks out of beyond the boundaries of space and time, and he just breaks the panel and he's floating on a white page. Great, I don't have it. I think it's Psalm 119. This entire several pages are a paraphrase of Psalm 119. So I kind of like mega props to Jin Lun Yang to sneaking that one in. On the surface, it's like, oh, this is a progressive racism. Racism is bad, kids. But then I think that his own personal childhood, the stories his mother told him, and his Catholic faith, he's mixing this up into a really unique thing where it's hard to you can't really pin it down and say this is progressive propaganda or conservative propaganda. It's just a story mixing up things that he likes and things he knows about into something that just feels very natural and very unique to Yang. So props on you for, I never thought I would see Psalm 119 brought into the Journey of the West, but I kind of dig it. These themes are continued later. Why did I mark this? I guess I marked this because this is my favorite part of the story, is everything having to do with the Monkey King. Like I said, I won't spoil the twisteroo, but it's unique. When you get to the twisteroo, you'll say, oh, wow, that's kind of interesting. Maybe you'll be like me and you'll say, I don't really get it. Or maybe you're smarter than me and you'll understand exactly what the heck you just read. But very unique. These are themes that would also come across in Boxers and Saints, which I will probably review. But definitely a very solid effort. I think it is deserving of its award. And I don't think you can go wrong with it. I like comic artists who tell completely unique stories. And Yang has done that by sort of bringing his Catholicism into the same universe of stories from Chinese culture that he, learned from his relatives. So, unique story. Yeah, I think I've said my bit. And there's the back cover. I guess that's interesting because it's unique to me to see how artists play with racial caricatures. I think it's really important for young people to read stories with racial caricatures in them, if for nothing else than to kind of inoculate us a little bit and have us think about, well, yeah, this is wrong, but it's not like this is going to kill you, right? I don't believe that the use of this stereotype is going to perpetuate racism against Chinese people. I believe it's a clever critique of racism against Chinese people using those very metaphors and archetypes. So bully on you for having the sheer balls to put a character like Chin Ki in a library book. I dig it. Go for it. If you see it at the library, check it out. But even higher recommendation for Boxers and Saints, which I will review later. With that, I'm #1 Marmaduke fan. I love you guys. I love my patrons on Patreon, and I will catch you later.